So, part 3 of Bleach the Thousand Year Blood War arc anime has been and gone, and well, what did you think? We've had just over a week now to digest the final couple of episodes, and it's enabled me to take a holistic look at the third and penultimate core of the anime, as well as frame this latest set of, well, 14 episodes against the backdrop of the entire series so far. And to be honest with you, I'm very impressed. I mean, seriously impressed. There's no other way to put it. Pierrot Films used the extra time they seemed to get incredibly well and produced a frankly masterful season of Bleach, lifting the episodes to a new baseline of quality we haven't really seen before. I mean, it was worth the wait, and therefore I'd be happy to wait again for part 4 in the future. While there isn't one single episode that really reaches the visual heights of something like The Fire, Part 3, The Conflict, achieves something even greater. It successfully elevates the source material across the board, taking and transforming the most contentious part of the final arc into something that simply works better. Because this really was perhaps the toughest part of the story to adapt, Part 3 could have easily felt like a setup season for something grander, but thanks to a litany of meaningful and impactful changes to both the story structure and the events within, Part 3 not only ends up feeling capable of standing entirely on its own, but is in fact perhaps the best season of the Thousand Year Blood War arc to date. There's a lot more to talk about in regards to the conflict, so in this video I want to give my review of the third part of the anime, taking a top-down look at the story, the characters, the presentation and everything else, before wrapping things up with a comprehensive personal ranking of all 40 episodes of the anime so far. I have a feeling that a lot of part 3 is going to score pretty highly in general. This video isn't designed to be a deep dive into every aspect of the anime. Moreover, we'll be taking a general look at how we think the anime did with part 3. So let's dive into the video and take a look at what part 3 of the Thousand Year Blood War arc had to offer. Was it really the best core yet? How does it compare with parts 1 and 2? And which episode of the core comes out on top? Let's find out. Before we get started on the video, guys, if you enjoyed this review, when you're done with it, make sure to hit subscribe and help the channel reach its next milestone of 300,000 subscribers. I really would appreciate the support, and it does mean the absolute world to me. Also, while you're here, make sure to check out my second channel, Mr. Tomo Talks Games, where I'm going to be uploading more frequently from now on. I really would love to get that channel off the ground, so if you're able to help me out, it would be absolutely appreciated. We're very close to 10,000 subscribers, and reaching that goal next, well, that would be wonderful. So any support over there, again, would mean absolutely everything to me. So thank you all so very much. And let's get on with the video. Episodes 27 through 40 covered chapters 609 to 661, with a little bit of 674 in there as well, which is a pretty sizable decrease in chapters covered from parts 1 and 2, and that makes sense. After all, we've been saying for a while now that part 3 is really when we'd start to see the anime making some massive changes to the source material, and I feel like that certainly came through here, though I'm expecting even more from part 4 to come. This time the anime covered the Soul King's death and the completion of Yhwach's invasion and subsequent conquering of the royal palace, the villain transforming the Soul Society's holy ground into an icy fortress as he prepares to collapse all 3 worlds into one. The anime also giving us the first half or so of the Varvelt arc, as the surviving Gotei 13 officers trespassed upon Yhwach's new world and battled his Schutzstaffel. Where parts 1 and 2 felt like a mostly faithful retelling of the arc up until this point, part 3 feels more ambitious, more daring, more willing to take some risks and shake up the formula. While part 2 was almost a consistent string of action set pieces from the get-go, feeling like more conventional Bleach fare, part 3 is a more complicated affair and can be roughly split into 3 different sections. The battle for and fall of the royal palace, the coming together of everyone to prepare for the final showdown, and then that first half of the Varvelt War itself. In the first section of the Cour, Yhwach and his Schutzstaffel defeat the Zero Division for good, before Ichigo and his friends arrive, continuing the battle as they wrestle for control of the throne room and Ryo's own life, as the fate of every world hangs in the balance. After Yhwach emerges victorious thanks to Uryu's treachery, he transforms the palace into his icy stronghold of Varvelt. Down in the Serete far below, the second Quincy invasion has come to an end, and the death of the Soul King threatens everyone and everything as the worlds begin to collapse. Ukitake steps in to act as an anchor for the universe, offering up his life to the right arm of the Soul King, while Kyoraku enlists Aizen's help in ridding the Serete of the excess power of Ryo himself, rescuing the Gotei 13 from its overwhelming might. After several of the sternritter who survived Yhwach's merciless Alsvalen at the end of Part 2 switch sides, the Gotei 13, the Vizard, and their newfound allies all come together to build a gateway to the royal palace. Meanwhile, Ichigo and his friends recoup after their defeat as Yoruichi reveals that she's been working with Grimjo, Neliel, and the Fullbringers Riruka and Yukio as part of a task force assembled in Waco Mundo, and the gang head back to the palace above. Upon everyone's return to the palace, they are shocked to see that Yhwach has completely reshaped the cityscape. While the turncoat Sternritter head directly to Silburn to exact their revenge, the individual factions encounter the enemy, with Uryu defeating Renji, while Mairi and Nemu kill Pernida. Kyoraku and Nanao overcome Leal, while Askin poisons Grimjo before subduing Ichigo and the others. After Yoruichi rescues them, Ichigo, Chad, and Orihime make for Yhwach's throne room, while the Gotei 13 and Vizard are confronted by a gigantic Gerard. Meanwhile, bazz-b is killed by Hashwolf, who then challenges Uryu, exposing him as a traitor to them, and the Bambis are all collectively bested by Yhwach, ending their uprising in utter defeat. The Quincy King eventually overpowers Mimihagi's hold on the worlds and begins to collapse them all as everyone converges for the final battle. As the Cour ends, Ryuken and Isshin arrive in Varvelt. So that was a brief breakdown of really everything the plot covered in Part 3, and to be honest, I would be amazed if you were a manga reader and this wasn't your favourite cour so far. For those of us who read the manga, this had to have been the most consistently surprising, shocking, and frankly exciting set of episodes to date. The sheer number of changes on show is bewildering in a good way. The first half of the cour or so is almost totally restructured, sometimes feeling completely unrecognisable, and at points we were enjoying almost half an episode's worth of new content every episode. I mentioned in my Part 2 review that the anime was really deviating from the source material there, but clearly I had no idea what was in store for us. We received completely new fights for characters that desperately needed them, namely the main characters. Ichigo, who has long been identified as a character with too little to do in the final arc, is given two, well, let's be generous actually and say 2.5 totally new fights here in the anime. One against Yhwach in episode 28, one against Uryu in episode 30, and a half-sized new fight against Uryu again in episode 40. And then on the other side of the coin, Uryu is another major recipient of this cour's good graces, also receiving several new fights. Now you might be thinking, well, fights aren't everything, but in a battle manga like Bleach, they help to convey plot, push the narrative, and expand the scope of the individual characters involved too. While Ichigo may have technically lost both his major new fights in this cour, that ultimately does not matter. True Shikai Ichigo feels much, much stronger and better defined here in the anime as a result of even having those fights now to begin with, and it really does feel like he's now been given the chance to show what he can do. Getsuga Jujisho is no longer a random one-off that's never seen again. Now it is actively part of Ichigo's arsenal, and that's so cool to see. As I mentioned in my episode 40 review, Kubo clearly identified the source material's main pain points, and a lot of them do revolve around our gang of main characters and them simply not having enough to do, them simply bouncing from point to point with little to no impact or effect, and that all feels so different here. Even outside of characters like Ichigo and Uryu, attempts have been made to clean up the narrative in a big way. More familiar faces are accounted for, including some characters who completely vanished off of the face of the manga, and it feels like there are fewer loose ends in general. I'm not going to sit here and list absolutely every single positive change the anime has made, but perhaps one of my favourite changes made by the anime in this cour is the newfound laser focus on Yhwach's motive and ultimate goal. I've said it many times before, but in the manga, we never had really any idea what Yhwach wanted or why. He only actually mentions freeing the world of the fear of death in the very final chapter. Other than that, it was a looming vague threat of existential destruction, the world's being collapsed for some reason, outside of Yhwach being a maniac. And again, I've said this before too, but as far as Bleach arcs go, the 1000-Year Blood War arc is the most ambitious and the most complicated. And the anime has smartly realised that the best way to improve the arc is to simply tighten it up. This is one of those rare moments where you do actually want to tell rather than just show. Yhwach's goal is explicitly stated here in the anime, and he's made moves following that to actually attempt to achieve it. As a result, the entire narrative feels more ordered, more structured, and is headed for a straightforward goal, which does wonders for streamlining what is otherwise an unwieldy mess. Yhwach's motive is also made clearer here in the anime, something that's really been in the works since part 2. As a result, almost everything related to the Soul King is clearer cut now as well, though there's still plenty of mystery to be found, particularly in the cryptic glimpses at a flashback we received. That brings me onto the pacing. Normally a thorn in the 1000-Year Blood War arc anime's side, the pacing has been massively improved in this cour, the result of the work they'd been doing in parts 1 and 2, why parts 1 and 2 often felt so rushed. The extensive restructuring here in part 3 helps make the story feel fresh, but it's the pacing that introduces the biggest change to how this anime feels to watch. We're no longer rushing to squeeze fights into a single episode. Scenes are given time to breathe, alongside huge amounts of new content, while the arc's biggest battles are amply split up. When reviewing those previous 2 cours, I used to say that 4 chapters an episode felt the best. That was the optimal number of chapters an episode should be covering, and here in part 3, I think that's mostly what we got, particularly in the first half of the cour. As a result, there simply hasn't been as much content cut from this cour either, which is also great. Aside from scenes that we actively wanted to see cut, like Gerard's original battle with the Vizard. All in all then, the stage is successfully set for a very exciting and hopefully satisfying final part to the anime. It's kind of amazing to think that fans, myself included, used to say that while this part of the arc was always enjoyable, and in fact I've always loved the whole Rayo's death section of this arc, it was also kind of where things started to balloon out of control and go off the rails somewhat. Yet here in the anime, this is now perhaps the greatest part of the arc so far. Maybe that's actually the case, or maybe viewing it through the lens of a manga reader, I'm just the most excited by these changed up episodes in particular, but even so, it all adds up to a great adaptation. Moving on to talk about the presentation of the third cour, and again, I'm incredibly pleased. There's been a noticeable uptick in quality, with almost every single episode looking really nice, and having at least one instance of incredible animation and choreography. I mentioned in my review of part 2 that the anime can feel static at times, which is offset by the incredible character art and attention to detail, but here in part 3, perhaps the biggest improvement is found in the team's power to now marry those two together. This cour, as a result, is the most dynamic and ambitious the Thousand Year Blood War arc anime has ever felt, and that feeling manages to permeate virtually every single episode. Like I said, there's no one episode that looks quite as insane as episode 6, The Fire, and the character art is wonky in a couple of episodes here and there, though that was also the case in parts 1 and 2. But for the most part, this is the best the Thousand Year Blood War arc anime has ever looked and felt to watch. The lighting is once again a standout aspect of the visuals here. There's nothing quite as bold or stark as the red sky used for the second Quincy invasion, but on the flip side, there's nothing quite so controversial either. The biggest change comes from the creation of Varvelt, which plunges the former royal palace into a pitch black void for some reason, while casting an eerie purple glow over everything. I like it. I think it looks really cool and provides a great backdrop for these final battles, especially when you can see that main central fortress itself in the background. The bone white Quincy castles and buildings look a lot better than the almost plasticky blue found primarily in part 2, and overall I'd say the general location of Varvelt itself as portrayed in the anime is a success. There's a great sense of scale created by the massive fortress in the centre, and I've always enjoyed the narrative of the various factions and forces making their way to the main palace from different angles, reaching different points and facing off against different enemies. It's a great sense of progression, and it's working well here too. There was a fair bit of CGI usage here in part 3, and just like part 2 before it, it was a mixed bag. Obviously, going back to Varvelt, the entirety of this Quincy city is CGI almost all the time, and I've got no issue with it. In fact, it allows for a variety of sweeping camera angles and dynamic shots, such as Gerard's first-person perspective, that I think looks really amazing. Speaking of Gerard, well, many wondered what would become of the Schutzstaffel and some of their more extravagant forms, and whether CGI might be used for them, but I'm delighted to say that for the most part they are hand-drawn and they look incredible. Gerard feels imposing and terrifying, while Leal's two holy forms are perhaps two of the most beautiful, albeit eldritch designs in the anime. The transition for Leal from a green to gold Reiatsu is very effective, and to be honest, Shadows Gone may well be one of the most stunning episodes to date. Now, while part 3 doesn't have a truly visually standout episode like The Fire within its ranks, the line work quality also never dips to the levels of episode 9, The Drop, or even episode 21, The Headless Star. Instead, that quality remains high throughout, something that feels like it was a priority for the team this time around. In terms of incredible artistic visuals on display, my favourite episodes this time were episode 29, The Dark Arm, which revolved around a magnificent flashback for Ukitake that demonstrated really how mature the anime's tone and presentation has actually become. The aforementioned episode 37, Shadows Gone, which featured not only Leal's stunning Volston dish as mentioned before, but also everything to do with the Shinken Hakyoken, which was brought to life beautifully here. And finally, episode 38, Friend, which may very well be the single most visually gorgeous episode really since The Fire, with almost every single shot looking like a painting, while the duel between Hashwolf and bazz-b was brought to life in a raw, fluid, and simply incredible way. Meanwhile, the new opening and ending Without Words by Six Lounge and Monochrome by Suiso respectively are both excellent. To be honest, opening 3 might be my favourite of the lot. I love the choice to present the opening in black and white, save for flashes of colour here and there, gleaming like gemstones amongst the grayscale, and the song is great too. The visuals are full of spoilers to an almost comical degree, but for those of us who read the manga, it was just exciting to see these moments brought to life. Meanwhile, Monochrome is a perhaps surprisingly upbeat ending and takes us through the various characters of the Cour in a way that really reminded me of the ending Hitohira no Hanabira, which was kind of nostalgic. The character art is wonderful, and I'll always appreciate getting new official artworks like this. Small changes to the opening and endings as time went by, such as Pernida's hood disappearing after episode 34 and Leal transforming into his Volston dish, are greatly appreciated too. It's a lovely attention to detail. I'm actually not sure about my ranking of the various opening and endings, taking into account both visuals and music. If I had to, I think it would go opening 3, opening 1, ending 1, opening 2, ending 3, ending 2, but I'm not entirely sure. In terms of the standout characters this time around, well, there's a few to touch upon here. Of course, the absolute biggest winner of Part 3 is none other than Uryu Ishida, whose story here in the 1000-Year Blood War arc has been nothing short of completely transformed. Look, Uryu joined the Vandenreich and seemingly turned traitor against his friends in the manga too, but his actions here in Part 3 are on a totally different level. The anime had been teasing Uryu's seeming descent into villainy throughout Part 2, but it's here where he really shines, with a string of utterly shocking moments to his name. Whether he's gouging out Ichigo's side, sniping a hole through Renji's chest, or even outright killing Senjumaru, this is no longer the placid, reactive Uryu from the manga who spends the entire arc milling around watching other people have an impact. This new Uryu is so transgressive in some of his actions that I'd be amazed if certain factions could ever really forgive him afterwards. And then, of course, the anime caps his entire story off with a stunningly evocative reveal of his true nature in the finale. In my eyes, Uryu has been essentially, totally fixed, saved, redeemed, whatever you want to call it, and this is even before his, hopefully also reworked, battle with Hashwolf to come. Aside from Uryu though, well, there are a few others we should highlight. Ukitake deserves a mention here, with the anime not only gracing him with an incredible all-new flashback, but also for seemingly changing his fate, or at the very least keeping both him and Mimihagi relevant, more directly involved with the course of events as they unfold during the tumultuous showdown in the royal palace, and apparently even beyond that. In a similar vein, I can't help but think the Soul King, or should I say Adnias, deserves a brief shout out as well. Although barely a character, he has never had more of a presence than in this core, and I'm still hoping and praying the anime gives him a fully fleshed out flashback at some point in the future. Of course, the participants of the major Varvelt battles so far need to be recognised as well. Kyoraku, Nanao, Mayuri, Nemu, Leal, and Pernida. Their massive duels, although adhering rigidly to the manga, provided epic showpieces for the second half of the core, with Kyoraku's bankai and Nemu's emotional death being particularly powerful moments. Kyoraku in general, and maybe I'm a little biased here, has a fantastic core, to be honest. From taking the initiative to release Aizen early on, a controversial decision for which he's forced to defend himself over, to delivering a rousing speech worthy of his position as head captain, my favourite captain is given a lot to do here, and I'm grateful for it. Speaking of Aizen, well, I would be tempted to include him here, and there's no doubt his brief appearances in Part 3 were excellent and exciting to see, but he really isn't around for very long, and ultimately doesn't leave much of an impact on the narrative itself. Next time though, well, I'm thinking he might make the cut, and to be honest, I think Chair-sama deserves a shout out here more. Next, we have Hashwolf and bazz-b, two sternritter who are privy to the arc's best flashback, their shared history and fated duel becoming one of the core's most resonant showdowns. Episode 38, Friend, is truly a work of art, and these two characters come together in a way that really works here in the anime. Finally, I think I have to once again give a nod to the series' main villain, Yhwach, who made the list of standout characters for both Part 1 and 2 beforehand. Because there's just no getting around it. Yhwach is the biggest driver of events in the narrative. The Cour literally begins with the reveal and demonstration of his true power, the Almighty, and his new fight with Ichigo is also wonderful to see. Having then absorbed his father's power and usurped the throne of the Soul King, Yhwach is now moments away from accomplishing his mad goal. And that's very exciting for us, paving the way for the final Cour to come. But that's it for my top-level review of Bleach the Thousand Year Blood War Arc Part 3, The Conflict. So now we'll move into the full episode ranking so far. So here we are, my comprehensive ranking of all 40 episodes of the Thousand Year Blood War Arc to date. Now, I'm not going to be talking about every single episode here, or else this video would be hours long. Instead, I'm just going to briefly discuss the placement of each episode from this Cour, and I think you'll see that, well, a lot of them did in fact rank pretty highly. In fact, I think the majority of the top 10 is now made up of this Cour, which is pretty crazy. When looking over this list, it's tempting to see an episode that ranks towards the bottom and think, you know, hang on, that doesn't actually deserve to be there. But then you look at everything above it and you're like, well, maybe that's actually fair, or at least I do. And that just goes to show the overarching quality of the adaptation. Anyway, without further ado, here's my list. At number 40, we have episode 9, The Drop. Number 39 is episode 8, The Shooting Star Project Zero Mix. At number 38 is episode 2, Foundation Stones. Number 37, episode 22, Marching Out the Zombies. Number 36 is episode 12, Everything But the Rain, June Truth. Number 35 is episode 4, Kill the Shadow. At number 34 is episode 21, The Headless Star. And at number 33 on the list we have the first episode of Part 3 to feature, and the first episode of Part 3 in general, episode 27, A. And really the only reason this ranks so low on the list is because it's only half an episode. The first half of the episode is made up entirely of a recap, specifically of the events of the Part 2 finale. However, what new content we actually get here, Uryu's killing of Senjumaru after awakening his Volstendish for the first time, Ichibe's sinister incantation, and of course, Yhwach preparing to face his father, is all great stuff. It's not bad, but something within Part 3 had to come last, and well, this episode comes with a huge handicap. At number 32, we have episode 14, The Last 9 Days. At 31 is episode 1, The Blood Warfare. And then coming in at number 30, we have our first full-length episode of Cour 3, episode 34, Baby Hold Your Hand. I mentioned at the time during my review of this episode that I thought it was the weakest of the Cour overall, certainly of the full-length episodes, and I stand by that. For as much as I love him, Mayuri's pontificating drags the pacing of the episode down dramatically, and artistically this episode is all over the place, featuring absurdly dark lighting and extreme close-ups on characters' faces where they're simply not warranted. Finally, there's Pernida, whose portrayal in this episode felt like a mess. The sternritter, and frankly everything about this fight, is handled much better in the second half, which features a lot later in the list. Again, this is by no means a bad episode, but it is definitely the most uneven of the Cour. Then, number 29 is episode 15, Peace from Shadows. 28 is episode 18, Rages at Ringside. 27 is episode 23, Marching Out the Zombies 2, and then the definition of a setup episode, episode 32, The Holy Newborn, slots in at number 26. I really like this episode, to be totally honest. From this point onwards, I genuinely really like all of the episodes in this Cour. It's exciting to see the return of Grimjo and Neliel, as well as the Fullbringers, and of course Yhwach creating Varvelt is a fantastic moment that sets the stage for the final showdown to come. Okay, in 25th place we have episode 3, March of the Star-Cross. At number 24th is episode 10, The Battle. Number 23 is episode 20, I Am the Edge. And coming in at 22, we have episode 29, The Dark Arm. This episode focuses almost exclusively on Ukitake, his sacrifice, and of course his brand new flashback, really doing the character justice in a big way at last. in a way the manga never did. But perhaps most excitingly, episode 29 ends with the tantalizing return of none other than Aizen himself. In 21st place, we have episode 11, Everything But the Rain. And just making the top 20 is episode 17, Heart of Wolf. Also just making the top 20 at number 19 is episode 37, Shadows Gone, which sees Kyoraku and Nanao defeat Lille with the power of her ancestral, mirrored Zanpakuto, the Shinken Hakyoken. Lille's second form looks incredible, and to be honest, this episode is perhaps the most beautiful of the entire cour. But the controversial ending to this fight can only be polished up so much. Slotting in at number 18 on our list, episode 31, Against the Judgment, is another setup episode, but the full-scale return of Aizen is very exciting indeed. Although this is essentially all he does in part 3, Aizen definitely leaves his mark, with a stunning showcase of power, unleashing Hado 90 to destroy the Soul King's overflowing energy. Meanwhile, the sternritter switch sides as the Gotei 13 prepare for the end. In 17th place, we have the penultimate episode of part 3, episode 39, The Visible Answer. Featuring a genuinely stunning sequence where Yoruichi activates her Shunko against Askin, The Visible Answer sets up the finale as Gerard grows gigantic and defeats the Gotei 13, at last kickstarting the Varvelt arc's messiest fight in a suitably epic way. In 16th place, we have episode 16, The Fundamental Virulence. And while both halves of the two-part finale feel like they are setting up events to come, episode 40, My Last Words, gets all the most exciting crowd-pleasing moments, including the amazing, unbelievable return of the Vizard, who come together to face Gerard in a totally rewritten sequence, to the reveal of Izuru's survival, and yes, even the much-anticipated return of Ryuken and Isshin to cap off the cour. But what really elevated the episode in my eyes was the sweeping revelation of Uryu's true plan, his resolve, and his adherence to his grandfather's cherished words, securing the finale of part 3's place at number 15. Okay, into the top 15 now, and at 14th place, we have episode 13, The Blade Is Me. In 13th place, we have episode 5, Wrath as a Lightning. In 12th place is episode 25, The Master. And then just missing out on the top 10, we have episode 36, Baby Hold Your Hand 2, Never Ending My Dream, coming in at number 11. The second half of Mayuri and Nemu's battle with Pernida is a vast improvement over its predecessor, presenting a genuinely emotional and powerful finale to the first major fight of the final showdown. Mayuri displays a shocking humanity, Pernida's portrayal is excellent, and of course Nemu's unwitting sacrifice is devastating. Plus, Xyloporo's cameo appearance is the icing on top. In 10th place then we have episode 35, Don't Chase a Shadow. The first stage of Kyoraku's battle against Lille is my favourite episode from the quartet of episodes that focus on the first two major fights with the Schutzstaffel. Kyoraku's dialogue and combat exchanges with Lille are so evocative of old-school Bleach in the best way. Lille's Volston dish is stunning, and of course Kyoraku releasing bankai remains one of the arc's biggest, most exciting moments. And the anime brought it to life in a bold and confident way, ensuring it will go down in Bleach history as something truly unforgettable. In 9th place we have episode 38, Friend, dedicated entirely to the flashback and duel between bazz-b and Hashwolf. Proof that yes, you can successfully humanise the sternritter, Friend is perhaps the cour's single most beautiful episode. The story from 1,000 years ago is agonisingly good, with each frame practically a painting, but here in the anime, it's actually the present day fight that stands out to me the most, featuring one of the single best endings to a Bleach anime fight I've probably ever seen. Coming in at number 8 is episode 28, Kill the King, in which the universe of Bleach hangs on the precipice. The episode starts incredibly strong, featuring a brand new battle between Ichigo and Yhwach in the Royal Palace that completely reworks their showdown from the manga into something meaningful, while Ichigo being forced to cut down the Soul King himself brings about the end of the world. The climax of this episode absolutely captures the sense of apocalyptic terror that I was hoping for, as it looks like the heroes have all but completely lost. Plus, there's that lovely little flashback at the start, teasing the fates of both Yhwach and Adnias, the Soul King himself. In 7th place, we have episode 24, Too Early to Win, Too Late to Know, and just knocked out of the top 5 now in 6th place is episode 19, The White Haze. In 5th place, we have episode 30, The Betrayer, and in my opinion, the second best episode of part 3. The Betrayer at long last included something that we as fans had been asking for since the 1000 Year Blood War arc anime began. An actual battle between Ichigo and Uryu. The stakes are high, the visuals and animation are incredible, and it really feels like the anime team went all out to bring this inevitable confrontation to life in truly spectacular fashion. Uryu revealing his Quincy Volston dish at last, something that again just simply wasn't a thing in the manga, seems uncompromising in his coldness, with the episode ending on a genuinely jaw-dropping cliffhanger as the Quincy Prince blasts his friend through the side, leaving him to die. Uryu has successfully evaded the watchful eyes of the Schutzstaffel, or has he? In 4th place, we have the highest ranking episode of part 2, episode 26, Black. However, in 3rd place, we have the best episode of the 1000 Year Blood War arc part 3, episode 33, Gate of the Sun. When this episode first released, I wasn't really expecting much from it, just the start of the showdown in Varvelt, to be honest. How wrong I was. Gate of the Sun is an incredible rollercoaster ride from start to finish, delivering in absolutely every way. The art is practically pitch perfect throughout, as the Gotei 13 and their allies invade Varvelt. Grimjo gives chase to Askin in a brilliantly funny scene, while Leal guns down the Shinigami in a horrific yet wonderfully ruthless fashion. My jaw was actually on the floor as those characters were blasted one by one, taking a fairly innocuous scene from the manga to the next level in a hugely effective way. Really one of the absolute best things the anime can do for the source material, one of the biggest successes it can achieve. But of course, the crowning jewel of this episode is the totally new fight between Renji and Uryu, as the Vice Captain unleashes his true bankai in a fantastically detailed display of everything it can do, including so much more than we ever knew previously. Meanwhile, Uryu himself is on top form as well, and the episode ends with him shooting Renji through the chest, seemingly killing his former ally. All things considered, episode 33 surprised the hell out of me, and delivered the best episode of part 3 and the 3rd best episode of the entire arc to date. That's a lot of 3s. But in 2nd place, we have episode 6, The Fire, and still the reigning champion in 1st place is episode 7, Born in the Dark. Well, there you have it. What do you think? The list is definitely getting a bit unwieldy, ranking so many episodes, but it is fun to see where everything ends up. I'm fairly happy with the list myself, though of course anything is subject to change. Episodes from part 3 make up 5 spots in the top 10, which is pretty crazy, I think, and indicative of the Cour's incredible quality. But there you have it, that's my full review of the 1000 Year Blood War arc anime part 3 and my comprehensive 40 episode ranking. I'd love to hear all of your thoughts down in the comments below. What do you think of part 3 of the 1000 Year Blood War arc? How does it stack up to parts 1 and 2 for you? I guess the only fitting way to end this review then is to give my definitive answer, and yes, I think this is the best Cour so far. For me, it goes part 3, then part 1, then part 2. Though they've all been an absolute joy to watch and experience, but yes, I think this one does come out on top. And I don't think that's recency bias either. I think I will still be feeling this way come part 4, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. What do you think of part 3? What were your favourite episodes from part 3? And if you feel like it, what are your top 5 episodes of the 1000 Year Blood War arc in general so far? I would love to know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you guys so very much for watching. As always, I really hope you enjoyed the video and I hope you took something of value away from it as well. Make sure to check out my second channel, Mr. Tomo Talks Games, if you haven't already. Let's try and get it to 10,000 subs. I really would appreciate the support. And as always, I want to end the video by saying a massive thank you and giving a huge shout out to my wonderful supporters over on Patreon. I really do appreciate you guys so very much. If you like what I do here over on YouTube and you also want to support me that extra step further, thank you very much. Over on Patreon at the $1 a month tier, you get your name in the credits of every video like this, and at the $2 tier and higher, you can enjoy all of my videos completely free of YouTube ads. Alright guys, thank you so very much for watching. Until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.